Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new edition of POLITIRIXX. We've got Soledad and we also got Dean. How you guys doing today?
Hey, how are you?
Good. I'm Michael, and now we shall begin. The first thing, Ethiopian women in Israel being given contraceptives without consent. This is huge, but this has been going on for the last 2 years. As far as the information I'm getting from someone actually of Ethiopian descent living in Israel now. Guys, you can chime in.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Ladies first. Go ahead.
Thank you. Actually, I found a article in Forbes magazine that was from January of 2013. And what they said was African immigrants, and most of them are from Ethiopia because a lot of Ethiopians are Jewish, who were coming to Israel as immigrants were forced to get shot, which was basically Depo-Provera. It's a hormonal contraceptive, and it was mandatory. Now, what I could not find is whether or not the women were told that that's what was in the shot. But then you still have this issue of they were forcing women to get this shot whether they wanted it or not. And there's a real ethical issue there.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'll chime in. Yeah. Just going for that where Michael said 2 years. My info was that it's been going on for the last 10 years because there's been a drop in their birth rate in the Ethiopian Jewish population.
I think they may have just gotten busted 2 years ago.
Yeah. So it looks like it's been going on for the last 10 years. And advocacy groups are claiming that this is a result of birth control forced upon the immigrants.
And only immigrants from Africa.
Right. Ethiopia. Right. Which is, and I believe it's 130,000 Ethiopians being in this right now. So,
and Israel admits it. They don't admit any wrongdoing, but they admit that they did it.
Right. And they did say that going forward, they're supposed to tell them what the shot is. It's kind of weird that this is going on because, World War II, the Germans were doing this to the Jews.
That's right. And Golda Meir made a comment, years ago that really bothered me because she kind of had this, well, the Germans did this to us, so therefore it's okay for us to do this to other people. And I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but I'm like, that. No, the two wrongs do not make a right. That doesn't fly. There's a real ethical issue here. You can't force somebody to be on contraceptives. It goes against their free will and their freedom to choose. And then you would ask, well, why is it only the immigrants coming from Africa? Because, clearly people come to Israel from everywhere, a lot of Eastern European Jews and Jews from America. So why is it only this one particular group? That's what we don't know. Why?
Yeah, it's really weird because they are Jews. I mean, it's not.
That's right.
It's not a nationality. It's a religion. It's,
Right.
And why would you do that to someone who's
first of all, your own faith, but why would you single out this group of people? And and then it begs the question, well, why is it? Is it a race issue? Because what's going on here? And if it is a race issue, then that's pretty insidious.
It is. Well, I'm trying to figure out because I thought about it and I'm like, how could it be a race issue when I know Israelis who are darker than the Palestinians?
Right. Actually, Ethiopians tend to be kind of fair-skinned, but either way, regardless of the shade, it's still wrong, So that's very troubling to me. And even though Israel is clearly an ally of the United States, but you know what? When something's wrong, you got to call it.
All right, but then that goes back to, remember we did that thing with the slavery, and I pointed out that Saudi Arabia still had black slaves, and they were still castrating young black men. And we're just looking the other way because it's an ally.
Well, exactly. Like I said,
same field here.
It'd
be hypocritical to go after Israel for doing that, and then not go after Saudi Arabia for doing a similar thing.
And and it says that says something about us, because clearly we're looking out for our own interests, but that's wrong as well. When if anybody's doing something wrong, they need to be called on it. And interestingly enough, what's terrifying to me is this is not the first time something like this has happened. And, Canada was part of the LSD experiments during the Cold War, where the United States was giving people LSD, and they actually had Canadian health ministers do it as well. Canada was also part of electroshock therapy experiments at the behest of the United States. And the United States in the 1930s, 1932 was the infamous Tuskegee study, where, for people who may not know what that is, they had a group, I think it was about 600 African American men from Alabama that were enrolled in this health study. And as it turns out, 399 of them had syphilis. But the people running the study never told them that they had tested positive for syphilis and didn't give them any medicine to treat it. So, again, why was that allowed to happen? And something that was equally troubling in 1946 to 1948, again at the behest of the United States, the U.S. had Guatemala give syphilis on purpose to a number of their prisoners, soldiers, mental health patients. So it's, we got to ask, what's going on, and how do we stop this? You can't just experiment on people, give people things without their knowledge or consent, or, why? We got to ask why. What's happening?
And it's even sadder is that our own government has done it to our soldiers.
Right.
Even white soldiers. I personally know someone who was, he was part of that electrotherapy stuff, and
going back to
messed him up. Yeah. He actually goes back to Germany, where after World War II.
And they did it again in Iraq, where they were giving soldiers medications, not telling them, or pills. They didn't tell them what the pills were. Just, here, take this. Mm-hmm. So it's, people aren't lab rats or guinea pigs, And
it's and people knew about it. I mean, look at most famous. This network has a show called Eclectica, and they cover superheroes and stuff like that. And there's a guy called Captain America who was a guinea pig.
Although, people knew about it, but it's not, again, this is not being covered by the mainstream news.
No.
It was actually, I forgot how I initially heard about the situation with the Ethiopians in Israel, but it was not a story that was covered, in the mainstream news at all.
And what the funny thing is, what's going to happen to Israel when they do? I'm guessing it's going to hit the mainstream after this whole thing of once they settle down who's running for Republican ticket and who's the Democrat nominee. When they when they need news again, I'm sure this is going to hit the newsways, and I'm sure you're going to hear the countries in the UN now saying that Israel, look what they've done. It's against human rights. It's going to come down on Israel.
Well, let me ask you guys this: how do you feel if they were to do that at the UN? Can America really say anything based on
our track record?
on the track record. I mean, because
they will, because Obama is not pro-Israel. He's not. He'll say something, and Israel will bring up that point. So that's just an argument you can expect to happen.
Because really, at this point, it really would be whoever's next in office will be faced with this. They would be the ones to, even go back in history and say, hey, you know what? This is something that we have to put in the history books. We can't wait until people are in college and when they specialize into, different things that happen. This has to be something that they talk about.
Israel's already said that going forward that, steps will be taken to deal with this issue.
They said they weren't going to renew the prescriptions for Depo-Provera. But I guess what we need to find out, though, is again, the why. Why was it that they were singling out this group? And for whatever reason, are they going to implement, or have they implemented other laws or measures to single out this one group of people? And if so, then that needs to be brought to light as well. But, I think it's, Michael had touched on something. There are ugly things in everybody's history. Every country's got nasty things they did. But, unlike the state of Texas, you heard in Texas, they changed the textbooks to take out things like slavery, and they're calling it triangle trade or the triangle Atlantic trade or something. And I'm like, what is that? No, it's slavery. Come on. We have to own up to our mistakes and our errors and things that were mistakes, but just nasty things we did. Because if we don't, you keep repeating it. Like we just said, they experimenting on soldiers. It's still going on. People need to know about it and get mad and, raise a fuss about it.
I just got a interesting text, and it's basically saying, well, wasn't this kind of ironic? One of the excuses that Israel says with this is that they don't want to be overpopulated, which basically means they don't want the African population to compete with their population. But wouldn't that go back to their situation in Egypt, the whole Passover thing, and the Egyptians were afraid that the Israelites would eventually outnumber them?
It also flies in the face of their own policy, because if I understand Israeli law, and I'm not claiming to be an expert, but if you can prove that you're Jewish, you can move to Israel. You can become, you get citizen rights. So if you're afraid of being overpopulated, then you need to change that law then, right? And it has to be, and something else about the Ethiopian community in Israel is they're one of the poorest communities in Israel. So, again, what's going on? Is it,
they're in poverty and high unemployment.
Right,
They have higher
exactly.
unemployment rates, and they're in poverty, and they're getting.
Do you think that this is a good excuse why we need to learn about different religions as well as history and not separate the two? Because the whole killing the firstborn thing, now they're killing the firstborn before they're even born.
Well,
It's kind of ironic.
I don't know if it's really a religious thing, or, like I said, is this a racist issue? Or, until we know why they did this,
I don't care. I'll call it. I got First Amendment's right. I see it as a racist issue. I really do.
Honestly, I do too.
I see it as a racist issue.
Right.
Jews are already outnumbered. Why not wanting another Jew? Because it's another color. That's pretty much it. That's the whole thing with that whole eugenics thing,
Right.
And you want that, what was that called? The Germans called it the desirable background.
Right. Right.
Eugenics is really a Greek word meaning good stock, good
Right.
health stock. And then the Nazis turned it into desirable background, meaning you're not what we want. Remember what Hitler wanted, blonde and blue eyes.
Exactly.
Had he won, there'd be no Asians, no blacks, no Latinos, because none of them fit the white, blue-eyed, blonde hair. Even he's different.
He didn't either, exactly. I'm amazed that nobody caught on to that. Like, you don't look anything like what you're espousing to be this ideal, but
tall, blonde.
And he was like 5'8", and
yeah, he kind of reminds me of. You ever see that picture of the little cat looking in the mirror and he sees a lion?
Right.
How others see you, it's how you see yourself. I think he had that kind of a problem that way. But
yeah, I gotta agree with you.
Yeah.
It looks like racism to me. If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, right?
Yeah. So, and you know what? It kind of like, I'll address the elephant in the room sort of thing. This kind of, it kind of hits about like with the creator of Planned Parenthood. She believed in eugenics too. So, and it's just kind of that same thinking of, you know, I know a woman's got a right to, it's not, I'm not talking about this, you know, a woman's right to her body. You know, everyone has, you know, everyone should, you know, have sovereignty over their body.
Right.
But, you know, when you start using that excuse to cull the herd,
right,
in lack of a better term,
right,
you know, it just leaves a whole bad taste in my mouth, you know, because who's always the ones who are told to do that? The ones in poverty, the ones without jobs.
Right.
You know?
Or as you said, people deemed to be inferior.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
And right then and there, when you deem someone to be inferior, isn't the person doing the deeming inferior in their own way for
absolutely
people that way?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's well, we're gonna have to see what Israel does from here. But I'm telling you, it's gonna come bite them in the butt in the UN. They're gonna use this against them.
Well, what would be the punishment, and can anyone stand against Israel?
Well, and that's, you know, and again, we're gonna have to, and the United States, and it doesn't matter if it's Israel or Saudi Arabia, like Dean said. You have to say, look, this is wrong. And if it means, you know, taking some sort of action against them, you know, then, you know, we did that. Remember, we had an we had an embargo against South Africa during apartheid. You say, look, you got to change this law. It's wrong. You know, because if not, we're just as guilty as they are if you allow it to go on and just kind of turn a blind eye.
Yeah, but you know what the problem is with that, Soledad, is that they're going to turn it against the U.S. as being hypocritical, given the high abortion rates in the black community. They're going to say, oh, yeah, well, you know, look, you're not getting them out of the ghetto. You're just letting them have babies, kill them. And then, you know, they're going to say, you could just look at the stats, you know.
And that's absolutely true.
Black kids have been killed every year. Because I can guarantee you, the last 10 years, it's probably more kids that died during the Civil War days.
And the only thing I could say to that, and you know, it's, you know, I guess we could say, well, at least we're not forcing them. And I'm not saying that's a great response, but that would be a counter, you know, whereas the Ethiopian immigrants in Israel didn't have a choice. You know, at least we could say we're not forcing somebody.
I mean, I don't know if some of them were told what it does to them. I mean, if someone,
I'm going to find out as much as possible.
If a doctor tells me I got to get a shot, guess what I'm doing? I'm looking up what that thing is.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, tell me that they all didn't know?
That's right.
That's
right.
Flying a little low.
Unless they lied of what it was. Like if it was just an immunization, or they said something like that. But a lot of, at least for the information I have so far, there was a good percentage, and that's the words I got, quote unquote, from someone in Ethiopian background that lives in Israel, that it was you either take this shot or you can't come into the country. And if you're a refugee, what are you going to do? But I will find out as much as I can to see if people actually knew what it was. Because you're already in a pressure situation. Yeah.
And were they told that before, you know, like did Israel make that a policy to where if, you know, because somebody coming from Ethiopia, if they knew, hey, you're going to be sterilized for a certain number of years, that Depo-Provera is in your body and you have to do it, it's mandatory, maybe they would have decided, hey, I'm not going there. Like, did they know? Was this a public knowledge, a public policy? Or like you said, did they, you know, were they told upon arrival, oh, by the way, take this shot, you know?
All right, so let's bring this to the U.S. now. Because I like what Michael had to say about, oh, if you don't get the shot, you can't come in. All right, there's a lot of vaccines they're trying to push on kids in the U.S.,
That's right. And
you know, I think only Donald Trump stood up and said, look at this, and how many kids got autism in the last 10 years because of these vaccines.
And there seems to be two camps when it comes to vaccines. And honestly, I think neither one of them's really good. One is the camp of, you know what, people that will get any shot that their doctors tell them. And by the way, the doctors have to tell them to get the vaccines because the CDC requires it. They have a schedule of vaccines. So, a parent will go to the pediatrician and the doctor will say, oh, your kid's, this age, you got to get this, this, and this. And that person says, okay, all right. Or like, now with the flu shot, you go to any CVS, hey, did you get your flu shot? Now, and then on the other camp are the people who say, I don't believe in any vaccines. And I think, like we were saying, if somebody's going to give you a shot, you need to find out what it is. Find out, what does this do? Is this really necessary? And I think, Dean, you and I probably, we're probably about the same age, I'm guessing. And, we had 8 vaccines as children, but it wasn't done the way it's done now. They, first of all, they were broken up, like measles, mumps, rubella were 3 separate shots, and they were not given to you as an infant. Usually it was like around age 2, and it wasn't a full dose, particularly polio, because you ended up getting a polio booster when you were 12. So you weren't getting, as a newborn baby, here, bam, we're giving you all of this stuff. But right now, children get 35 vaccines, and that's not including stuff like the flu vaccine.
And that's the parents' fault because my pediatricians will tell you, I said no to quite a few of them.
Yeah.
The parents can say no. You can still say no.
You can in New York. I think most states have a religious exemption. I think New York has a philosophical belief kind of exemption. But I think California is trying to make it no exemptions. And, then again, you got to ask, okay, right now a kid gets 35 vaccines, but they're vaccinating babies for things like tetanus. You only get tetanus if you step on a rusty nail that's covered in dog poop.
And it's good for 10 years, too.
That infant's not going to be doing any roofing projects where he's going to step on a nail. Hepatitis A, that's another one. I did get a hepatitis A vaccine when I was in my 30s because I was, New York local color. I don't know if you heard that. Sorry, I'm in Midtown Manhattan. Some colorful characters. Anyway, I was going to do a project in Kenya, a film project, and out in the bush in the Kakamega forest. And I said, okay, well, I'll get a Hep A vaccine because it's transmitted by food. I don't know what I'm going to be eating. But again, a baby does not need a Hep A vaccine. That kid's not traveling to Kenya.
Well, that's the bottom line. You're saying exactly what the parents out there need to know, or those would-be parents. Stay informed, stay on top, and you got a right to say no.
And we have to be aware, and one of the most insidious vaccines is Gardasil, and I've been a very outspoken critic of Gardasil. That is the HPV vaccine.
Yeah.
And Governor Rick Perry of Texas got a lot of heat for this because, first of all, he got a nice chunk of change from Merck. Merck makes the vaccine. And he actually had put a mandate that all 12-year-old little girls in Texas had to get the Gardasil vaccine. And thank goodness a lot of parents said, oh, heck no, we're not, no. And so I believe in Texas they did retract that. But, and that's the kind of thing we got to be terrified of. But they flat out lie, actually, because Gardasil, their slogan was, I'm going to be one less, meaning I'm going to be one less woman who gets HPV. And they actually market it as this is the HPV vaccine. You won't get HPV. You won't get cervical cancer because there are certain strains of HPV that cause cervical cancer. But the problem is there are actually 116 different strains of the HPV virus. And that vaccine's only good for like 11 of them, only 5 of which actually cause cancer.
Yeah.
So let's ask this question. With all this knowledge that we spoke about, how come none of these questions are coming into the debates? And who, in your opinion, would attack this the best way? Which candidate?
I'm sorry, you go ahead.
Well, you did say that Trump was the only one.
Yeah, he was. I know, that's right.
He was a favorite choice.
Yeah.
Honestly, who's behind this? the pharmaceutical companies. I mean, you saw that with Merck and Gardasil.
And like you said, they're getting paid.
And you're fighting tremendous money. Gardasil took out full-page ads in all the New York City newspapers, ads on buses, and they're actually trying to get boys to get the vaccine too. And I'm like, boys don't get cervical cancer because they don't have a cervix. It's insidious, and unfortunately, people need to think about things. Shingles is another one that they keep telling adults. But if you listen to the ad, it says 1 in 3 adults will get shingles, and I'm like,
if they had chicken pox when they were kids,
right? And I'm like, wait a minute. If that's true, that would be a third of the population, of the adult population. In my entire life, I've only met 2 people with shingles. One was a woman who had a rare condition she was born with, so it made her prone to it. And the other one was a woman who had chemotherapy, and the chemotherapy caused the shingles.
Yeah, what happens with chemo is, it just happened to a friend of mine. His wife had cancer, and she got the chemo. And when you get chemo, it lowers your immune system, and anything can kill you. His wife died last week.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was sad. From a common cold.
Right.
Had she not had cancer chemo, she would have been fine.
Right.
The same thing killed her and left him with a 10 and 8-year-old. So, it stuff like that. Yeah, it lowers the immune system.
So we have to question, when they're saying 1 in 3 adults will get shingles, and I'm like, wait a minute, let's do the math here. Did
you check just 10 people and got 1 in 3, or did you...
Exactly. I mean,
that's why always with these studies, any study, who is behind it? What do they have to gain from it? Any study, who is behind it? What do they have to gain from it? I remember in the 90s when there was a study that came out that said Chinese food was bad for you. And I was like, that's impossible. 1 billion people eat Chinese food every day. It's not bad for you. And who was behind the study? McDonald's and Burger King. Oh, geez.
McDonald's.
What did they have to gain from that? You got to be careful with that stuff. Oh,
absolutely.
I remember there's one thing, going back to Israel, there's one thing I remember now I wanted to say about Israel. I still give them... it's wrong, and I'm hoping they correct what they're doing. But you still got to remember, when it comes to Israel, in their hospitals last year, they treated about 188,000 Palestinians and other people from the Muslim world, whereas no Israeli gets treated in their hospitals. So, I give them I don't know. I'm disappointed from all that, but I don't blame all of the doctors there. So that's what I wanted to say. Sorry about that. But I do think Trump would speak up against these vaccines, as he already has.
Well, and I think, basically we as because the politicians, for the most part, most of the politicians are in the pockets of the pharmaceutical companies, and they're pushing this.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say don't get any vaccines. I'm not a doctor. I gotta give that disclaimer. I'm not a doctor. I don't pretend to be. I'm not giving out medical advice here. But, for instance, polio, okay, that's I can understand getting a polio vaccine. I do not understand getting a chickenpox vaccine because I had chickenpox and I'm still here.
Well, you get to try. That's what I tell friends of mine who are now becoming parents. They tell me what vaccines. I said, get the vaccines you got.
Right, which was, again, 8 of them.
Get the vaccines you got, and then that's it.
Right.
You know how these other new vaccines are, you need it, it's good. Oh, well, you know what? It causes brain cancer, it causes, you never mind that third leg your daughter's growing, it just don't.
Well, speaking of which.
The tried and true one, that's it.
Speaking of which, and this is interesting, both Japan and Ireland are banning Gardasil because of all the adverse effects they've had, including death, but also loss of ovaries. And I'm like, so you have 2 countries banning Gardasil, and here we're telling every little girl to go get it.
And how does all this, you think, will affect that whole TPP thing? Because remember, medicine's part of it.
That's right.
You know,
That's
India,
right.
India with their patents on the medicine, generic medicine, all this. How's this going to work now? If countries are saying no, no, no.
Well, and it's the fear with medicine, because we were also talking about intellectual property rights, is that then you can get the knockoff version, or coming in from countries in Asia. Is it the same quality? Who knows? And so basically you could have the same situation with vaccines, a knockoff version of a vaccine, which we already know, like Gardasil causes real problems. So are you going to have a knockoff version of Gardasil that will cause even more problems?
Right.
Who knows?
That's what's concerning me. You're going to get a bad generic version of a knockoff of a bad vaccine to start with.
And not to sound like I'm in Brave New World or some kind of sci-fi movie, but
there already.
That's it. We got to think about things. My fear is, look at what happened in Israel. They were forcing these women to get this Depo-Provera shot, whether they wanted it or not. So my fear is, if you do get a vaccine, like say for argument's sake, the flu shot, how do you know there's not a microchip in there? And if you say it can't happen, my dog is microchipped because my dog is a rescue, and all rescue dogs in New York come already with vaccines and microchips. And in Sweden, this is the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. There's a company in Sweden that is microchipping their employees. Good luck calling out sick. I'm sick today. No, you're not. We can track you. I mean,
game.
This is frightening to me. This is really, really frightening.
That's why the Second Amendment's so important in America. It's frightening.
Because somebody's wearing a lab coat doesn't mean he's got your best interest at heart.
No, they don't. They don't.